Today in motorsports, Bottas believes that he will be world champion this year, so therefore the 2017 Formula 1 season is already decided. MARQUEZ is way too powerful and godlike that it's actually starting to become scary now. NASCAR makes FIA ruling look tame and reasonable. And, while at gunpoint, I tried to explain why I genuinely think the Halo isn't a bad thing. All in a jam-packed episode of Unsafe Press Release, your unreliable source for racing news. As the Formula 1 season goes well into its summer break, the silly season starts to bloom like violet in Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory, and everyone who has ever used words in a conversation are coming in with their predictions on who will be going where next year, with some people actually thinking that Bottas won't be getting a Mercedes seat for 2018. If this happens and I end up jinxing him, there will be no more videos from me, because what point is there to go on if Bottas isn't in a race-winning car? One of the most popular topics in the silly season is whether Fernando Alonso will stay in F1 for McLaren next year. Will he retire from racing entirely? Will he make a commute to IndyCar and face the love and affection of every American living and breathing? Or will he do something completely batshit crazy, like go to BTCC or something? Who knows? Fernando now is about as unpredictable as the sport he does professionally. At Renault, there's still a lot of talks about whether Robert, the $6 million man Kubica, could be the man to take the Renault seat. The popular opinion being that he should replace Jolyon personality of a cardboard box Palmer for a seat at Renault. I mean, I wouldn't mind Kubica being in an F1 seat at all, but if he doesn't live up to the hype, I wouldn't want anyone giving him shit because of it. You try getting your arm partially amputated and come back to me in 6 years' time. Now, a lot of you are expecting me to have my own opinions, but unfortunately I'm going to have to stay as a passerby for this time round, mainly because I'm going to be doing all the opinioning later in the video. Firstly, before I attempt to ramble about a sport I nearly have no knowledge of, feel free to leave the video and instead listen to the Bike Life podcast on the Motorsport 101 network. They go into much better detail than I ever will, and it's actually genuinely informative. But if you want the abridged, slightly inaccurate version, please stay on the video. Here we go. In Moto3, Spanish rider Joan Mir bagged his 6th win of the season, literally using everyone else as a goddamn whipping post, with his closest competitor, Romano Fenati, in 2nd and Aaron Canet in 3rd. The top 3 in the standing finishing in the top 3. I am now having Hamros Vet flashbacks from 2015. In Moto2, Swiss rider Thomas Luthi bagged his 1st win of the Moto2 season, followed by Alex Marquez and Miguel Oliveira, while championship leader Franco Morbidelli only managed an 8th place finish, closing the points gap to a measly 17 points. And Brad Binder, last year's Moto3 champion, continues his subpar season in 12th place. God, I have probably left out really integral pieces of information, but the last time I cared was never. Ladies and gentlemen, the main event, MotoGP. The race started with it being declared wet on a drying track. Marc Marquez, trying to be cool and edgy, has a different compound than everyone else. And it being Marc fucking Marquez, it just works. Everyone else started peeling in after a few laps with the exception of Rossi, Dovizioso and Zarco, so they led the race for a little bit. But you must remember, this is the Marc Marquez show featuring Valentino Rossi. So, after a while, on new tyres, Marquez was rocketing past everyone and nearly caught up to them before they pitted. Meanwhile, Iannone has an accident while trying to avoid Aleix Espargaro. Fuck's sake, I can't do this. Iannone has an accident while trying to avoid Aleix Espargaro, who had an unsafe release. Sick name drop, bro. While in the end, Marquez wins the race, 12 seconds ahead of his teammate and life partner, Dani Pedrosa, while Rossi had to work his way up from 11th to 4th. Good job, Rossi. While Maverick Vinales took the final spot on the podium. Now, who the fuck doubted Marquez's skill at any point in his career? I am curious to know who genuinely thinks he isn't the greatest rider in the world at the moment. We're doing NASCAR things again. And this time round, we managed to not only suffer through a race in Watkins Glen with Martin Truex Jr. winning the race, make all the left turn jokes you like here, but we also had another chapter in the NASCAR overtime rule story. So I'd rather talk about that instead of the Watkins Glen race, because I don't have the faintest idea of what happened, and I'm not sure I care either. So, do you remember back in Indianapolis? You know, the track that everyone thought was Pocono?
You made that joke already!
Shut up! Well, they had overtime in that race, and there was a crash before the overtime line, which caused a red flag. And after the red flag, they nearly crashed before the overtime line again, but KCK managed to just get past before the caution went out, which made the race a lot longer than it really needed to be, blah blah blah. So, NASCAR officials decided to come up with a new way of implementing the overtime rule, by effectively reverting it back to what it previously was. But instead of there being 3 attempts until checkered, it's unlimited. So if they had this rule during the Brickyard 400, we would have most likely got an even longer race, and maybe even a 24-hour race if we were really lucky. If we really think about it, we might even have Jackie Chan win this time round instead. This might be the last time I ever talk about NASCAR in this series, and for very good reason. Well, we had to get to this part of the video, didn't we? I knew doing this series and trying new things out would get me to this moment. And sure enough, 5 or 6 people demanded that I quote-unquote fucking do it. I might as well go ahead with it. It's almost if I didn't say that I wouldn't be persuaded by my audience. How ironic. I very much barely touched on the fact that I'm in support of the Halo, but I joked about it and not went into detail on why I wasn't against it. But I feel a good chunk of the criticisms against it are unjust and, well, petty. If there's one thing that most F1 fans absolutely can't come to grasp with, it's change. We've seen it with the advent of the hybrid turbo era, we've seen it with the conception of the hands device, and we've even seen it all the way back in the 60s when Sir Jackie Stewart was protesting better safety on racetracks and in cars. The poor bastard was exiled for not wanting his friends to die every week. We've seen this time and time again with almost every kind of change for the better. And usually, after a while, everyone just gets used to it and moves on like it wasn't even a problem in the first place. And the implementation of the Halo is in no way an exception. F1 as a community are so clingy with things looking aggressive and cool that they're willing to disregard an addition to safety just because it quote-unquote looks like shit. Kevin Magnussen's comments on it portray how backwards and cocky F1 drivers can truly be, by saying, if it looks like shit, it is shit. I don't know, despite it being, you know, rigorously tested for 6 goddamn years and made in response to accidents that have literally killed people, you're just going to tell me that just because you don't like the look of the thing, that means it's shit, or that it wouldn't have saved insert driver here. What the hell do you know? Formula 1's fanbase really needs to stop embracing tradition, because if you keep embracing it, you'll ultimately hate the next change that will come round the next time we have a large debate about safety, or the treatment of grid girls, or fans of the opposite gender. It could be literally anything. Also, anyone who uses this picture as a genuine argument is probably pretty stupid anyway. So, that's a slightly more in-depth look for why I don't think it's a bad idea. Maybe I'll go into more detail in a separate video. Again, comment your criticisms in the box below so that I can ignore them or reply in a passive-aggressive way. See you next time, folks.